What's up, and welcome to the Very Best Self podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Brown. Tune in each week as I have candid conversations with inspiring humans, including athletes, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and anyone out there making waves. Get ready to leave your comfort zone behind, step into your power, and live a more purpose-driven life. I am so happy that you're here. Now let's do this. Hi, guys. Welcome back. I am so happy that you're here. I want to just start off by saying thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Those of you who are kind of making this podcast a routine in your life and continue to listen and download the episodes and be a part of this community, that really means so much to me. And when you share them on Instagram and I get to repost your shares, it just really brings a giant smile to my face. So I just want you to know that you being here does not go unnoticed. And I want to thank you for that. Lastly, secondly, firstly, I don't know. Today is all about productivity. That's what it's about. It's about productivity. It's about organization. But you know, in true VB Squad, Very Best Self podcast nature, it's also about so much more than that. And of course, dives into mindset and how to really connect to our very best selves, right? So I have Ryder Carroll on today. He created the bullet journal method. And so I feel like a lot of people have heard of the bullet journal method. And if you're not a current user of this method, I think by the end of today's episode, you just might be. So I hope that you enjoy this. So many key takeaways. It was a great conversation and I'm excited for you to listen. Here we go. All right, you guys, we are back. And today I have a really exciting guest. I have Ryder Carroll on today. He is the New York Times bestselling author of the Bullet Journal Method and creator of the Bullet Journal. I feel like at this point, like everyone has at least heard of the Bullet Journal. It's pretty popular and at least people just have heard of it. And so I'm super excited to have you on today. Anything organization or just basically filing all of the insane thoughts that are going on in my mind at any point, I'm obsessed with. So thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. And so I guess, you know, you created this journal to help with the same thing I just said, basically the creating a filing cabinet with all of your thoughts and having them swirl around in your mind all the time and feeling that, you know, disorganization that a lot of us go through and feel all the time. And the shame around that, I think, at least I feel a lot of shame around my disorganization. And so you had this idea. I just kind of want to share the story from what I had read in your book of how this concept happened and how it came to fruition and really just like who you were as a person before you created this and how it's helped your life.
Sure.
Loaded question, I know.
There's a lot there.
But I guess I asked this question because I think from the outsider perspective, most people might consider that someone who created a journal is super organized, and maybe you are now, but you weren't always that way. So that's the cool thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely not. I would say that it exists because I am not a super organized person. If anything, I struggled with organization all of my life. I created the bullet journal method, or what became known as the bullet journal method, because I struggled with it so much. It's the answer and the solution to my own challenges. And that's kind of the origin story. It started back in, I would say, late elementary school, early middle school, when I started realizing that my peers were having a much easier time in school than I was. It was much easier for them to focus and to stay organized. And it kind of seemed like they were having a lot of fun in school and I was having less and less fun in school. So I went to a school where it's like kindergarten to 12th grade, all kind of with the same people. So the interesting part about that is that you start to realize differences in your trajectory when you see your friends being able to do something that you can't, specifically in school. Like, math wasn't a problem to my friends at the time, and it was to me. And I kept on making these experiences until it was clear that things were harder for me than for others, which then eventually resulted in poorer and poorer grades and so forth and so on, until finally I was diagnosed with ADHD. So there was actually a reason for it, which was both helpful and unhelpful. On the one hand, the diagnosis meant, yes, you do have this challenge. But on the other hand, and I'm going to date myself here, at the time, it was a very new diagnosis. So there was really very little that I could do about it. It's like, you have this thing, have a nice day. There were not a lot of resources available. This is before the internet as well. So I had to kind of figure out, what am I going to do with this information? I can either just use it as an excuse to keep falling behind, or I could use it as a way to really kind of motivate myself to do something about it. And I did the latter because I guess I'm stubborn, and I started figuring out small little ways to become more focused and organized with the only tool that I had available to me at the time, which was pen and paper. I think it's important to note, because it's very much part of the bullet journal method, is that it did not arrive fully formed, right? So it kind of developed over time, one solution at a time, or part of a solution at a time, over many, many years. So I would try something and it helped me just a little bit. So I refined it and it helped me a little bit more. And then I'd try all these other things, constantly trying things, because I was desperate. I needed tools. And every once in a while, something would work. So through like a lot of trial and error, I started finding tools that actually helped me become significantly more focused and productive, and allow me to actually accomplish my goals, which was just not available to me. So over years and years and years of refining these things, eventually I kind of packaged what I had learned. And that's what became the bullet journal method. But before, it's just how I was using my notebook, trying to survive.
Right. And so the difference between the bullet journal method and typical journals is a typical journal will have prompts laid out for you. And so the bullet journal is like kind of a plug and play moment. So there's a bunch of different methodologies, and you can put them in the journal as you see fit for what your personal needs are, and tracking things. Am I right about that? And as I explained to people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I provide a foundation of tools, like here are the basics to get you started, because you need some kind of structure. And that structure allows people to create and design their own tools. So in one way, it is structured, but it's structured in a way to be very customizable for every single person's experience and needs. It becomes what you need it to be over and over again. And I guess that's why I think it's important to mention that it never arrived fully formed, because it isn't finished. It's continuing to evolve for me and for everybody who uses it. You kind of begin bullet journaling, but it changes over time, depending on your own circumstances, as we all need different tools at different times in our lives.
Right, because all of our brains work differently, but how cool to have something that grows with you and changes and evolves as you do as a human being. And so I think that's really cool. And I'm personally just kind of getting into it myself. And I am the person that you talk about in your book that has Postit Notes scattered everywhere. I've got 10,000 journals. I've got 10,000 lists. I'm like, okay, cool. I got to write it down. I got to write it down. I got to write it down. I know that about myself, but keeping it all together and keeping myself sane is like, it's a challenge. It is. And especially I think nowadays, I think, there aren't so many human beings anymore that just have the 9 to 5 and that's all that they do. People are so much more multifaceted. They have their side hustle. They have their passion projects. They have all these things that are going on. And so, for me on a personal note, I've got this podcast. I'm a SoulCycle instructor. I'm trying to write a book myself. And there's like a million different things that I'm working on. And so it's like, I just have notes everywhere. And I'm like, okay, reading this, I'm like, there's hope for me. Which is comforting. And so anyone out there listening that, feels the same, that feels like they can't get out of their own way to save their lives, like this is a methodology that is kind of really built for people like that. And I guess I just am constantly writing down things I'm inspired by and quotes. And I also have a notes, like my notes, like if I, do you know that blogger girl Tinks? I don't know if you know who she is. She was like, if I ever die, she was like, don't read the notes in my phone. And I'm fully like the same, because I'm like, do not open up my phone and look through the 17,000 pages of notes that are not in order in any way, shape, or form. But that's what this does, is allows you to bring order to all of your thoughts, which I need that.
Same here.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I've read that, I want to kind of talk about. One thing I've known for a long time is that we're 42% more likely to accomplish a goal if we write it down. What are your thoughts around that? And what is the methodology or the difference between having a thought in our minds and then what happens when we transcribe those thoughts and dreams into pen to paper form?
I think that the most important thing, at least in my own experience, and I find this to be true in the community a lot, is that we have many notions, right? We have the beginnings of ideas. So a thought and an idea aren't necessarily the same thing. You feel a certain way, or you have a certain thought, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. I think that's why they can be so distracting. Maybe you feel anxious. Why? Right? Or you feel excited. Why? What does that look like exactly? And we live such intense lives right now that all of a sudden our minds are filled with all these pieces. They're very specific and atomic, if you will. And I think that when you write things down, it forces you to actually articulate that thought. It forces you to develop it in real time. You need to literally use your words. So you start to get a lot more purchase on your thoughts, and you start developing your thoughts into ideas very quickly. I feel this way because, or here is an idea. So you're all of a sudden breathing real life into something that was just a fleeting experience, if you will. And that's really helpful. Also, I think what's really important is that, of course, we can have ideas as we're thinking throughout the day, we're piecing it together, but those ideas disappear really quickly, or those thoughts disappear really quickly. And one thing that I find incredibly powerful about writing things down is that all of a sudden you're parking your thoughts, that they stop, and you can see them clearly written down on the page for the first time. And there's a very big difference between having a thought in your mind and having a thought on a piece of paper, because all of a sudden something may make much more sense or make a lot less sense. And if it makes less sense, then you have an ability to kind of continue to develop it. But I think there's a really important transition that happens between your mind and your hand. And oftentimes that's the beginning of something that will develop into a real idea or an action, if you will.
Right. Because it's all about turning, if you want to make things happen if we want to make things happen in our lives, it's all about turning the thoughts into action. Because a dream is always a dream if it just stays in your mind.
Right. And I think part of the reason why it remains a dream is that you forget it. We forget so many of the things we want to do, even when they really inspire us. And I think, to your point before, you have so many things that inspire you, which is a wonderful quality to have. But all of a sudden you have too many things inspiring you, and all of a sudden all you have is inspiration and no direction.
Do you keep your bullet journal next to your bedside? Because I wake up so often and I'll be like, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. And I'll think to myself, this is the best idea I've ever had. And I'm like, I don't need to write it down because it's such a good idea that there's no way I can ever forget this. And then I wake up and I'm like, what was that thing again?
Oh yeah, I've told myself that story too many times to know that it's true.
Yeah,
not by my bedside, but there are many days where I walk directly from the bed to the notebook to write things down.
Yeah. And also, to your point about how it changes from your mind to the paper is, I was reading also just cognitively, like college kids who type their notes versus college kids who actually write their notes. They understand the content so much deeper, because what's happening in that moment is, like, if you're typing, you're kind of writing word for word what the person might be saying. But if you're writing it, it's like your own personal language, because you hit, you'll do short form and you'll write things in ways that you understand. And also it's just the way that it's going through that loop in our brains that we're just actually kind of receiving the information versus just basically being a scribe and writing down,
Yes, you have to think about what's being said. And that's really important. Like, we can listen all day long without hearing anything. Right. So it's, I think, especially for people with ADHD, what's really helpful is by using your own words, it forces you to think about what's being said, which means that all of a sudden you go from a passive to an active state, especially when you're trying to, as we do in bullet journaling, reduce information to its essence. Like, what about what I'm hearing is important? And that makes you use your mind over and over again. And you do that by articulating things using your own language. And that helps you engage with content.
I love that. I mean, I think the easiest kind of example I can come up with that for in real life that I think I've talked about a lot on this podcast is because it's just something that I really care deeply about. And is remembering people's names. How many times have you introduced yourself to someone and been like, hey, I'm I'm Victoria, what's your name? Da, da, da. And they say their name, and then you go about your conversation or whatever. And you're like, I have no idea what their name is. I have no clue. So that's like the easiest example of listening, but not hearing, or hearing, but not listening, and just remembering someone's name when they speak to you. But yeah, all in the same kind of realm of things, but we can practice that daily by being really conscious when we meet people, like looking them in the eye. And when you ask their name, one of the things I like to try and do is repeat it back. I'll be like, you'll say, I'm Ryder. And I'm like, oh, Ryder, nice to meet you. And I'll say it back. But that's totally not really in line with what we're talking about all the way. But just a, sidebar about that for sure.
I mean, I think it is actually aligned in that you've discovered a tool that really works. And for me, in many ways, like, bullet journaling is a tool for thinking. So it's not about bullet journaling, it's about figuring out what works. I just found that many things are improved through the written word. I think one of my favorite quotes is, you write in order to learn how to think. And for me, journaling is a way of practicing writing over and over again.
I love that. Another quote you said was from a friend of yours. I'm going to try and remember it. Sometimes the long way is the short way. Did I get that right?
Sometimes the long way is the short way. Yeah, there's so many variations of that. Yeah.
Figuring this out is a little bit complicated, the bullet journal in and of itself. And spending time with yourself and categorizing all of your thoughts, and like, it becomes easier over time, like anything else, right? But like, figuring it out and going through that process and methodology and learning that way, it takes a long time. Right. But eventually it categorizes your thoughts in a way that makes sense and allows you to do the paramount thing, which is zoom out and see what's going on in your life. And that's why, it's so necessary and helpful. But yeah, the long way is the short way. I loved that.
Yeah. For me, I've been doing it for so long, so it's very hard for me to see how hard it is to get into bullet journaling. But it's interesting because I feel like the hardest part is to wait until you have the moment of recognition as to why this is really helpful. And I think that a lot of people who start bullet journaling start because of what they see online. And there's a lot of really decorative interpretations of the methodology, and you have to be an artist, and there you go. You have all the colors.
Pens, a whole rainbow of pens to make my bullet journal pretty.
Yeah. Let's put it this way. I explained the fundamentals of bullet journaling in a free video that you can see on the site and YouTube everywhere. And that takes 4.5 minutes. Those are the beginnings. So like, starting with that puts you in an environment where the next thing is able to happen, which is you start figuring out how you can use this for yourself. Like, that's a big part that's missing from a lot of people's practices with bullet journaling is, what are you trying to accomplish with this? This is why intentionality is really at the heart of the methodology. It's like, you can buy the best tools in the world, but if you don't have a project that you need to use them for, they're useless, right? They don't provide no value. So a big part of bullet journaling is to start to discover how it can really help you. And once you start aligning the tools that I provide with an actual purpose, that's when it clicks for a lot of people. And that usually takes a month or two. It's because everyone brings their own life into it. I think that's the thing that sets it apart. It's not me telling you how to live your life. It's like, here are tools that will assist you depending on what you're trying to do. You bring the purpose into it. You bring the story into it. You bring the direction into it. And it takes a little while to figure out, it's like, oh, this is what I need this for now.
Right. And I mean, I think there's a lot of books out there that really dive into the habits of highly successful people. And one thread that ties highly successful people together is they have a routine. They have something that they wake up every single day and do. And so this, making this a part of your routine and a part of who you are fundamentally as a person, is one key factor in just becoming successful.
I think it's been very helpful for me, just in that it removes a lot of choices that I have to make all the time. Like, where am I going to write this down? When am I going to take time to think about this? Okay, what is my priority? What isn't the priority? Like, in a previous life, all these things were scattered, and I kind of consolidated this all into my own routine, into my own practice. So the fundamentals that I teach don't only provide templates for you to think with, but it also provides a framework as to when to engage with your bullet journal and what to think about as you're bullet journaling. So a lot of the things that happen in the bullet journal method are kind of invisible. So we have like daily reflection, weekly reflection, monthly reflection, and we think about things in a very certain way and have certain filters which take the content that we're writing down. And this is a thing that's often missing from a lot of productivity systems. Like, there's only the record. You're capturing things, but what do you do with that record? You can have a million of the most valuable notes in the world, but if you don't read them again, if you don't know what to do with them, they provide no value. So a big part of bullet journaling is, what do you do with the things that you write down? Why are you writing down the things that you're writing down? Which is really brings us to the core of the methodology, which isn't about becoming better at running in the hamster wheel. It's about taking a step back and really defining for yourself why you're doing the things that you're doing. Sure, it'll help you become more productive, but it's more about aligning your why with your what. That's really the essence of the methodology. And that's something that requires routine.
Right. Yeah. And you said, which is so true about Barack Obama wearing the same suits, same color suits, and, Steve Jobs with his black turtleneck. And I think there was another example, I don't remember. But, eliminate choice as much as you can and find out what's actually important in any given moment, and what is something that you're spending time on that you don't really need to be spending time on.
Yes.
So becoming more efficient with our time and the things that we do. So I want to talk about apps and technology and how our brains are constantly toggling from app to thing, and like overall how that dips into efficiency. Because if we're juggling a million things at once, we're not actually really getting, I wouldn't say anything done, but you're not getting a lot done as much as you could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have no problem with technology, really. I spent most of my career designing apps. I was a user experience designer, and I fully can appreciate what a force multiplier, just a Freudian slip, force multiplier apps can be. But I find that apps are really good at helping us connect to the world around us and with each other, but they're not very good at helping us to connect to the world within. And it's really important to understand your motivation as to why you're doing anything, right? And it's like, if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then no matter how productive you can be, it won't mean anything. It'll feel meaningless, right? You can be going 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction. And I think that a lot of us do that all the time. And so for me, technology needs to be used very intentionally, why am I using this app? And that's something that for me was a long struggle for a while, especially as there was more and more apps, especially with ADHD. It's like, oh, the next shiny thing. And there's this promise of making you super hyper productive and solving all these problems and, making you superhuman. And sure, they can, but I often found that they were solving problems that I didn't really have. Right? It was just adding more clutter to my life in some ways. So for me, a big part of my own evolution was figuring out, what am I trying to build? And then finding the tools that I need to do that thing. Again, tools are just as valuable as they are in helping you create something. And I think that a lot of us, especially because apps are so powerful, focus on the tools and not the plan. So for me, the interaction is like, everything starts in analog because it slows me down. What am I trying to build? Why does it matter? What tools do I need to do that thing? And then finding the apps that do that. And that's when they become enormously powerful to me.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I have this just here. Have you ever seen these? I love this.
Oh yeah,
it's a stand timer, obviously, but you can go on Amazon and order these. So this is a 30-minute stand timer. So I know when I turn this over, I'm like, okay, I can't look at my cell phone for 30 minutes until the sand runs out. This is like, it's silly, but like, I'll look up at it and it's sitting right. I'll set it right beside my phone, so that when I want to reach for my phone, because it's like an impulsive thing at this point, I'm like, oh, nope, the sand timer is definitely still going. I need to stay focused on exactly what I'm doing right in front of me. So that helps me a lot. Yeah, it helps me a lot. Actually, I was just having a conversation with someone at work literally last night about this, how they're like, I just keep reaching my phone and I don't have any need to reach for my phone. There's nothing that I need to see right now. And it's just an impulsive thing. So I don't know. We have to work to always kind of combat that happening because we're all guilty of it.
Absolutely. I mean, we like to be stimulated, right? We like to be aroused and like, oh, I have a moment of doing nothing. And oh, God forbid I might get bored. I might as well look at things that have absolutely no relevance to my life. Here's a rat dragging a pizza in the subway, like, great. My life is now enriched. But no, it's an hour passes and I couldn't tell you what I saw for the past hour. It's easy. It's very easy.
Yep. The mindless scroll that we all fall victim to from time to time. And there was a line that I always try to remember too, which is spend more time creating than consuming.
It's true. I mean, the thing is that we're up against the most powerful technology in the world trying to consume more and more of our time. It's literally designed for us to become addicted to it. And this is not even new information. And nobody wants to admit that they're an addict, myself included. So it becomes really important that we find ways to be more intentional with technology, because technology is unlimited and we are very limited. And that's something that it's really hard to keep in mind.
Right. Especially with what's going on, or what has been going on in the world now for almost 2 years, is screen time is way up. Screen time is at an all-time high.
COVID has given people an excuse to get rid of good habits. There's an epidemic of loneliness, and loneliness is usually intensely felt when there's no connection. So there's two ways of solving that. One, you distract yourself from the loneliness, or you connect with people through the screen. But in both cases, you're going to the same source. So it's not, now have become dependent on our screens in a way that wasn't even available before. So it's becoming even more important that we become very intentional about our relationship with technology, because a lot of social media is making us feel much worse. We go to it to feel better, but we leave feeling even worse. So it's an ongoing exploration of our relationship with technology.
Right. And I recently saw that Glennon Doyle had posted something along the lines of you're comparing your life not to their life, but you're comparing your life to their feed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the cherry picked moments of perfection, like are the moments that we're all comparing ourselves to.
And we do it ourselves too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we cherry pick our moments and then we compare ourselves to other people's cherry picked moments, which is just a mind fuck in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if the trend would be that you only share the things that really mattered to you? Not the things that you thought would make you look good, but the things that you actually really cared about. And a lot of things you care about are not necessarily positive. They're concerns. So it's social media is just inauthentic for the most part. I'm not saying globally, but most of the time people want to be like, hey, my life is good. Let me prove it to you.
Look at me doing X, look at me doing Y, look at me doing Z.
Yeah. So it's, of course it's hard to compare to that. Wow, that's an amazing trip that they always seem to be on.
Yeah. Anyways, so one thing that in my world is insanely important to me, and I feel like I credit probably most of any of my success to, is just creating a sense of community and bringing people together. And that's what I care the most about. We've got the Very Best Self podcast, which is, has the Very Best Self squad. And I think it's like something that really drives me and that I care about, because it's what I do. Everything I do is for the squad. And so I know the bullet journal community is also super strong. I mean, let's talk about the beginning of the journal. You posted something somewhere and then it went viral and you never expected any of this. And then it was a crowdsource funded, right?
Yeah. So to be clear, the bullet journal method is just that, a methodology. So a lot of people think it's an actual notebook, because now there is also a notebook, but originally it was just a way of using any notebook you want. And you can do the bullet journal method in any notebook you want. But a year into it, I didn't really know what to do with it. This was like a side project that I did in 2 weeks, just kind of reformatting what I've been doing for years in hopes that it would help people who were dealing with the same challenges I was. And then I launched it and kind of walked away from it. And all of a sudden it became a thing. So for a year, I just kind of observed, what can I build now that would be helpful? And the reason that I was so interested in that is because communities started forming around bullet journal and how they used bullet journal method in ways that I would have never imagined. We're talking about every walk of life applying the same methodology to very different challenges, from dealing with mental illness to physical illness to education to parenting and all these things that I had never needed to think about. So as the creator, I was like, oh, wow, okay. I didn't realize that would align or map on so easily. And people started sharing. They became incredibly vulnerable, talking about the challenges that we're facing. And for me, that at first was almost confusing, because even back then, the toxicity of the internet was really revving up, and anybody who was vulnerable or shared or something was usually immediately trolled to oblivion. But in this case, somebody else would be like, oh, I'm going through that as well, and I tried this thing out. Have you tried that? And like, no, I haven't. And then they'd come back, it's like, oh, that was really helpful, and I tried this. Have you tried this? And it became like this crowdsourced evolution of problem solving, because there's really no barrier to entry with bullet journaling. You have a pen and paper and you can write. It's once you get the basics, you can do whatever you want with it. And people were sharing these incredible solutions that I could have never come up with myself, because I just don't face those challenges or those circumstances. And I'm like, what can I do to support this? Because this is really amazing. This is way bigger than myself. And then a year later, I thought, like, why don't I build a new version of the website that focuses on how the community uses the bullet journal, not just how I use it. So I launched a Kickstarter campaign, and as a gift for the higher backer tiers, I was like, maybe it would be kind of cool to make a notebook that was specifically designed for bullet journaling. So I partnered with this company called Leuchtturm 1917, who made the notebook that I was using, which I was actually introduced to by the community, by the way. They're like, have you ever tried this? I'm like, no. And I tried it and I fell in love with it. So I reached out to them and they had heard of me. And so we made this limited release version of a custom bullet journal notebook. And when I launched the Kickstarter, the notebook sold out immediately. And people were like, why is this a limited thing? Why don't you just make a notebook? And I would say people were just as interested in just the notebook as they were in the new website. So I went back to Leuchtturm and we're like, hey, why don't we just do this? Why don't we create this thing? And that's when Bullet Journal became a business. And yeah, I worked with the community to develop the tools and the design of the notebook. And that's the beginning of what led me to focus on Bullet Journal for full time.
And then you wrote a New York Times best-selling book that talks about stories of bullet journal users and how this has changed their lives from every age and every walk of life, and also teaches you kind of the nitty-gritty of how to do it and why it's important. So NBD, no big deal.
Well, it was interesting because when I shared Bullet Journal, I shared one side of it, which was specifically like the organizational productivity aspect. There was a whole other part of it that I used that I just wasn't ready to talk about at the time, which is the why. Why do I do this? Why is it important? Why does a goal actually matter? Right? Why am I doing these things? How do you find meaning in what you're doing? And these are questions that occupy me all the time. And that's really the more interesting part of all this stuff. Like, sure, I like being efficient and productive, but I have experienced over and over again working incredibly hard towards something and accomplishing my goal and then feeling completely meaningless over and over again. It's like, I ran that thing, I launched that company, I got the raise, all these things, and it meant nothing. So for me, a big part of bullet journaling is figuring out why I'm doing what I'm doing. And the book was me basically aggregating all the emails that I've been writing over the years as to my thinking about this, like the philosophy that I've been using to make my life significantly more meaningful, or have helped, like different mental tools that help me figure out why I'm doing what I'm doing, or let me stay aware of that.
Right. Man, I think so many of us can relate to wanting something so badly and then finally achieving it and arriving at that place, and then feeling that emptiness where you're like, why did I want this? Because you really didn't kind of anchor yourself into the reason behind why you were doing what you were doing. So many of us has felt that way. And so it's like that emptiness that you feel. So it really helps with making sure that you are doing things because you want to do them, not necessarily because you saw someone else do it and wanted the outcome that they had, or wanted the praise that they had, or you saw someone else succeed at something and thought, well, maybe that would be fun if I did it too.
Absolutely. And that's kind of how we're conditioned to operate. I mean, I would almost argue that the first, goals are only helpful in helping us navigate our intentions. I think that that's the why intentionality is so important for me. I think that if you do something because you want to do it, because it lights you up, because that's it. Don't expect to get anything out of it other than enjoying it, or it meaning something to you right now. Right now, you will never get anything that you want, ever. I think it's a really important distinction. You will never get anything that you want. You might get something more, you might get something less, but whatever expectation you have is incorrect. So I think that it's really important to start with, I just want to do it because it's meaningful to me. And then you win, and then you use goals to help you make progress, to kind of, okay, in order to keep on doing this business, I need to make some money. So this is how I can make some money, but I'm not doing it to make money. It's so I can continue to do this thing. I want to get mentorship because I want to get better at doing this thing. It has to start with a real connection to whatever it is that you want to do. I think that I know it's cliche, but I think that we need to focus on the process and not the outcome, because the outcome is completely unpredictable.
Right. Focus on the process and not the outcome, because the outcome is completely unpredictable. Amen. That's the truth.
You can't control.
No, you can't. And it does always end up somehow being a little bit different than we ever imagined or planned on, or, life happens on life's terms always.
Yeah. Life has zero interest in what you want.
Zero. Yeah. So how can people be a part of this community? Because now it's like intentionality is the backbone of what bullet journaling is. And so, there was kind of all these places in all the corners of the internet where people were kind of getting together to talk about their bujo, as you call it, right? Bujo, for short. But you kind of created a place for people to land.
Yeah. So this year we launched Bujo U, which is a membership site, which basically aggregates the best possible resources for a bullet journal, because bullet journal has become very popular and spread very far, and in some cases very thin. So a lot of the information that people find about bullet journaling is just incorrect, or it's an interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation. But there is a real core, and there is a real structure that's not insignificant, and it's far from being irrelevant. So there are things that one needs to know, concepts that one needs to know to make this work. And if anything, I was confused as to how I can best serve the community in the way that I was. So I realized that it's too big. It's way too big. I just can't help everyone all the time. So I wanted to create a home that could serve as a place for really committed bullet journalists to learn from one another. So that's what Bujo U is. We have live events all the time, and I'm talking directly to members, and we're developing new ideas together and just sharing things. And I like to call it an intentional social network, because there's like no algorithms, there's no ads. Like, people pay for their membership, and that keeps the lights on and lets me hire the people that help me run the thing. But basically, the better we serve the community, the better we can run. Like, their interests are aligned. So again, in this case, technology is wonderful, right? So it's one place where all the best resources are, and everything we do is very much based on the feedback from the community. So it helps me learn as well. Like, my own practice has been greatly affected by what I've learned from the community, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about good problems to have. The community was too large, so I had to create something to bring everybody together. I mean, that's incredible. That's really awesome. Well, I mean, congratulations about that.
Thank you. I mean, it's infuriating in that, like, there were a lot of people out there teaching bullet journal to make money, right? And what they were teaching had nothing to do with what I had put together or instructed. So it's kind of like these get rich quick schemes, or, teaching people things. But of course, I get the email from the mother or the teacher being like, "Hey, I tried this class and it didn't work." I'm like, "What class? I don't have a class," and all of a sudden, it'd be like, "Did you try this? Did you try that?" And for me, it was really important to keep the integrity of what I'd put together, because it has proven itself very effective for a lot of people. There's something there, and it becomes better and more effective with time as people really focus on developing it. And that's the thing that's so beautiful about bullet journal. It becomes whatever you need it to be at different times of your life within a certain structure. So this community really serves as kind of an incubator for really solid ideas from people who really understand what they're doing. Even the people who have no idea who become members quickly learn in a way that they can get started much faster and get on board and get these ideas, not have to kind of stumble around on the internet trying to figure out what the right way to bullet journal is. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, there are a lot of imposter videos out there. There's a lot of people on YouTube. If you Google bullet journal, there's a lot of random people on the internet who try to teach the bullet journal methodology. You just go straight to the source or get the book. I loved the intentional intersection between mindfulness and productivity.
I like to describe bullet journaling as a mindfulness practice that's disguised as a productivity system. I think
I like that.
very accurate.
That's what Soul Cycle is. That's exactly what Soul Cycle is. It's a mindfulness practice disguised as a workout. And I started working there almost 10 years ago. And I was like, that's why people keep coming back, because it's good for their mental health, because it's in a quiet, or it's in a dark room and you don't speak for 45 minutes and you're in the middle of this intense workout. And, if you have an instructor who is also, speaking, sometimes motivationally towards you, it's like, and puts you in this mental space where you can think about everything that you're going through in your life and then bring it in the room on the bike. I'm like, you're actually taking intentional time out of your day to think about the things that are stressing you out and to potentially get to the core and the source and the root of those things that are stressing you out. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit, you feel better afterwards. Like, of course you do. And it's funny you say that, because I've always thought that that's what Soul Cycle was. And so Soul Cycle started 15 years ago now. And I'm like, this was when therapy was more taboo. This was when people really, I still feel like we're still in the midst of not wanting to talk about their feelings, and going to therapy was not cool. And it's like this phenomena caught on. And I think it's because it was, in a way, a lot of mental therapy for a lot of people, and they just didn't realize that was happening.
That makes a lot of sense. I too find enormous relief through exercise. And for me, I find the reason is because you become present. And I haven't taken a Soul Cycle course yet, but it looks really intense, and intensity usually makes you present. Like, you have to show up, you have to be there. It's really hard to be distracted. And being present is having the amount of time that we're present every day, I think, is decreasing very rapidly, because as soon as you pick up your phone, you're gone. And I think that for me, using pen and paper, again, creates an opportunity for presence. So maybe that's the connection.
Right, 100%. And I think on that note, we'll close it out there. Take as much time as you possibly can to be present. Oh, wait, I have another question I forgot that I ask everybody. Sure. What is one piece of advice that you would tell your younger self?
I guess I have two answers to that, I think.
Great.
One answer is I wouldn't give my younger self any advice, because then I wouldn't be who I am now. The other one is, I think it's not necessarily advice, but a mental model, which is real but not true. I think that we torture ourselves unnecessarily because of what we think and what we feel, thinking that it's the truth. Like, we're really experiencing things, but it's not necessarily the truth. It's there's what happened, and then there's their story about what happened. And I feel like it would have just reduced the amount of worry in my life having that understanding.
All right. I love both those answers. And I probably think the first answer is my favorite that I've gotten yet. So I love that. Where can people find you on the socials and follow Bullet Journal?
Bullet Journal's everywhere. Pretty much just bulletjournal.com, @bulletjournal. We're very active on IG. And yeah, Bullet Journal is a great resource where you can find many things for free.
Amazing. Yep. People love free things. So we love that. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate you. And I think there's just so many golden moments, nuggets right in this episode that people really appreciate. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Am I right or am I right? I told you that today's episode was going to be a really good one, and Ryder was so awesome. Like I said, so many takeaways, things to write down. And for those of you who feel like you're not organized and you really want to be, and maybe you have 10,000 journals in your apartment the same way that I do, and you scribble down notes anywhere you can, or your phone is full of notes. This is a methodology to kind of bring all of that together in one place and organize your thoughts so that you can organize your life. Wow. Organize your thoughts so you can organize your life. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Listen, if this is one that you loved, share it with someone you love. Always share it with someone you love. Send it to somebody. let them know that this helped you and maybe it could help them too. That's why I do what I do. So yeah, if it helps you, share it with someone else. That is a wrap for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Thank you for listening. As always, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Victoria Brown, and please follow our podcast handle at Very Best Self. Like, comment, subscribe, review, all the stuff, all the things. So thanks. I'll see you next time.